Hi and welcome back. It's a week later. It's actually just slightly shy of a week later by a couple of hours or so, but close enough to call it. So, having worn this watch for a whole 7 days straight, what I'm going to do now is we're going to take a look at the time grapher readings again after a week of continuous wear. And I'm also going to see how much the watch has gained, and it has gained. So I'm just going to compare that with the time on my phone, which is what I synchronized this watch with at the start of the week. And it looks like we're going to be about 2 or 3 seconds past. 2 seconds. So 1 minute and 2 seconds. 62 seconds gain in 7 days, which calculates at 62 seconds divided by 7 days, 8.85 seconds, which tallies near enough with my daily evening checks. I've been checking this every evening and it has been gaining about 8 seconds, and that gain has been consistent. Now, before anybody sort of jumps around and says, oh, that's terrible, it's really not, because when we're talking about gain or loss on a wristwatch, the important factor is consistency. If a wristwatch is gaining or losing a consistent amount day after day, then that's actually a good thing, because it can be regulated out. That's what the regulation is there for. If it varies wildly day by day, it's gaining a minute one day, losing 30 seconds the next, and what have you, that's where you might potentially have a problem. We're going to get the time grapher set up and take some more reading. Same settings as before, lift angle at 50 degrees, period to 2 seconds, so it resamples every 2 seconds for a more accurate read. And we're going to start with the watch in dial down position. And dial down, we've got amplitude 275 degrees and plus 15 plus 14 seconds per day currently. Let's let that run for a little while, as we did before. I suspect that the readings are going to be very similar to the readings that were taken after the unboxing. So after approximately a minute of that, we're going to turn that into the dial up position. In dial up position, we've got 0.3 D terra, 279-AC amplitude and plus 5. Okay, that seems to be setting to about plus 7, but varying between plus 5 and just a little higher. So again, as before, there's a bit of discrepancy there in terms of dial up versus dial down. I'm going to move to pendant now. That looks like we're running about plus 11 plus 12, 260 amplitude, 0.4 millisecond beat error. So I'm now going to turn that to pendant right, and I'm going to restart this just so that the trace is in the middle of the screen, it's easier to see. So we've got pendant right or 6 high, and we're looking at about plus 10, 255, 260 amplitude, and a small beat error of 0.1 millisecond. You may notice from the previous one that I'm holding the stand here, and that's because the pivot is a little weak, and you'll see if I let go, oh, there we go, if I let go it rotates like so, hence the reason. So I'm going to move that down to pendant up or 3 high. And we're looking at plus 16, plus 14, 0.1 millisecond, and 270, 265, 270 beat error. Last clean trace, and for the sake of completion, we're going to go pendant left or 12 high, and see what we get there. As you can see from the results, if you compare them to the results from the unboxing, they're actually very similar. There's very little change has been made in that period of time, so I'm assuming that these movements were left to run in a little bit at some point, either prior to assembly into the watch cases or after assembly, because after a rebuild, a fresh rebuild, usually within the first 24 hours, there is a little bit of change as the oils distribute themselves evenly around the movement. So you can see there we've got about 250 amplitude, and currently about plus 20 and 0.5 millisecond beat error. So not brilliant, but these are results that can be tweaked a little bit. Now you could say at this point, that's good enough, that will do, and many people would. For myself, I wouldn't be happy with leaving it at that without at the very least regulating it. But what I'm going to do just now is pop off the bracelet and we're going to take a look at the movement and hopefully get some shots under the microscope and see how that looks. My preferred type for removing this type of case back to try first and foremost is the rubber cup type like this. If that fails, I do actually have the Rolex type dies with the knurling, but this, even if it does slip, is not going to cause any damage at all because you've just got this rubberized finish here. Now we can go ahead and continue unscrewing the case back until that comes loose like so. And that's the movement that you can see in there. And it does actually look really nice. It looks very nicely finished compared to some of the clone 28242s that I have seen. I'm impressed by the look of that. I'm going to swap the lenses over onto the macro lens and we're going to take a better look up close. And we will first of all remove the oscillating weight. The finish quality of the movement is really nice. It's easily as nice as any base movement ETA I've seen. Interestingly, this particular movement, the PT5000, not this specific one, nor the PT5000 in general, but the PT5000, which as you will be aware is a clone of the ETA 28242, they have actually made one of these movements to chronometer specifications. One of these movements was actually made, adjusted, set up and sent off for chronometer testing and passed, just to give you an idea that these guys are not playing around anymore, you know. These companies are essentially saying that they're now in a position where the manufacturing has gotten good enough that they are confident in doing this. They can make movements that will pass chronometer testing. And it's not just movements that are clones of other movements such as this either. There are other Chinese movements which are being built to exemplary standards, and I personally think it's something we should be taking note of. I really do. So there's the automatic bridge, which for anybody familiar with the 28242, that looks just like your typical automatic bridge. And honestly, just from the initial inspection, the finishing on this is really good. And bring this up to get a really up close and personal view of this for you, just so you can see. You can see the name there, the logo and the PT5000, but just to give you an idea and show you the actual quality of the finishing on these bridges, which really is incredibly good. And I've seen quite a few clone 28242 movements, including some of the better Seagull ones, and frankly this so far is the best quality clone of an ETA movement I have seen, without a shadow of a doubt. And I can tell you now for a certainty that if this had ETA and the caliber number on, there's a whole ream of people, myself included, who would not bat an eyelid at it thinking it was anything else. And anyone else out there that tells you otherwise is a fibber, because that is excellent quality. That's very, very well made. What I'm going to do now is try and get some close-ups under the microscope. You can see there, that's the ratchet wheel for the mainspring barrel, and you can see we have got some little bits of detritus, which is not uncommon when these are being assembled in factories which are probably not as hermetically sealed as they ought to be, but given the price point it comes under the what would you really expect banner. There's the crown wheel, and if I can turn this crown a little, I don't know if it'll be visible on this, but I did see under the loop some little bits of detritus on the teeth of the crown wheel as well, which I'm not particularly noticing just now, but oh, there's a little bit just there as it's coming round towards the click. See the small fibre just there. Hopefully that's visible. Just as it's coming onto the click there, as it's coming onto the back of the click, there's a small fibre visible there. Again, not hugely surprising. That's the dial foot and the clamp. You can see the finishing quality of the movement is actually really, really nice. It's got this kind of sandblasted finish with your fine adjustment regulator there. We've got the KIF type shock assembly rather than the Inca block, which is used, both of which are used on the ETA movements. That's the manufacturer's logo, and then of course the caliber number PT5000. You can see the balance oscillating away there. One thing I did notice, and I'll show you this in a moment, is the Etachron regulating lever, which is not quite as nicely made as the ETAs. I will show you what I mean there in a moment. And there you can see the pallets beating away. I'm just going to stop the balance a second. Oh, let's just pull out the crown. Oh. And you can see the escape wheel, and can't really see the pallets very clearly there, but let me just try and it's a little tricky to fighting with the lights from the overhead light and everything else, but you can see the pallets there, and I'm being picky here, but they look like they're a little bit too heavily epilamed, as do the teeth of the escape wheel. But that's me being picky. I'm looking for faults really, so do bear that in mind. It's not bad, it does the job. The oiling of the pivots looks pretty good, to be fair. There's a little bit of dirt around, but not horrific, not incredibly bad. Top of the barrel lid and the teeth all look pretty good. And as mentioned previously, of course, there's a bit of a fibre there on the ratchet wheel. Yeah, the lubrication side of things really doesn't look bad. Doesn't look bad at all. And obviously this is the upper side of the movement. We can't see the lower where the dial is fixed without actually removing the dial, which I might end up doing yet, who knows. And all in all, it looks really, really nice. It's a really nicely made movement. It's just a little bit of a shame that it wasn't assembled into the watch in cleaner conditions. Now, in a Swiss factory, this is the kind of thing that they're very, very stringent about, is as dust free an environment as is possible. And obviously when you're selling a watch for 160 quid versus entry level at 600 or 700, then you know that's where there's a little bit of a difference. And bear in mind the entry level at 600 or 700 Swiss watches are pretty much all machine assembled as well, so you know there is that. Just moving on to the Etachron regulator, I'll show you what I was meaning regarding that. This is what I was wanting to focus on and show you. This here is the Etachron regulator. This is effectively the regulating pins. What's going on here? I think the weight of the phone has just kind of, yeah, it's the weight of the phone that's actually carrying that down. Apologies, I'm going to have to try and hold that focusing knob as well. So this Etachron regulator that you see here, this is what emulates the pins, the fixed pins and the boot on a conventional regulator, and this is adjustable for fine tuning. This one, I'm just going to push that crown in so we get that balance oscillating again, and hopefully you will be able to see that we've got a little bit of breathing going on with the hairspring there bouncing between the pins, and you can turn that stud to regulate that. Now it's probably hard to tell from this, but looking at it under the scope myself, I can tell you that that is not as nicely finished and shaped as an ETA one. The ones on the 28242 movements I've worked on have a very nice gradual curve on both faces. This one is much more angular and rougher, but again we're kind of picking spots there. The hairspring looks good, the stud and the concentricity and everything else looks very nice indeed. I am more pleased than I expected to be by what I'm seeing under the scope looking at this movement. It's not spotlessly clean. I didn't expect it to be, because again these cheaper watches are assembled in factories that are not so stringent about the cleanliness and quality, and that is quite simply just one of those things. It's literally just one of those things. What can you do? Start increasing the cleanliness and criteria for that, and then the price of the goods increase, and at the moment where China manufacturing is, that would not be a viable option for them, because they'd have to be starting to increase the prices towards your entry-level Swiss stuff, and people of course would go, no, I'll buy a Swiss watch, thank you. So these are still a good buy. The little bits of dirt and fibres and what have you could be a nuisance. They could get places they shouldn't want to be, but they're not going to cause any real harm. Looking at that, it's easily rectifiable, and the bits that I have seen would be easy to remove with a little bit of Rodico and careful application using a loop. It could do with a little bit of fettling and tweaking in the regulation department for sure. So this long form review has just become a longer form review, and rather than just dive straight in and strip and service the movement, I've cleaned up the little bits of fibres that I pointed out previously, and I've just tweaked the Etachron regulator and adjusted the regulation of the watch. So just start that fresh and we're dial down. And just to clarify that, we dial up 9 high, 6 high, 3 high, 12 high. Dial up. Pendant down, 9 high. Pendant right, 6 high. That should hold because the bracelet's not on it. Pendant up or 3 high. These last two positions are the ones that are least frequently likely to happen, unless you are a right wrist watch wearer, in which case, if I say someone who's a right wrist wearer, I will regulate the pendant up as the third position after dial down, because obviously on the right wrist, the pendant would be up. And finally, pendant left or 12 high. Back to dial down. So as you can see there, we have got, with the major positions, a much tighter regulation than we had previously and much closer to the 0 than previously. And this is just with fine adjustment of the Etachron pins and tweaking the beat error and regulation. And I'm going to reassemble the automatic winding works and reseal the case back, and then I'm going to wear this for another week and see what's what. So looking at that trace previously, the only thing that I'm not entirely happy about is the discrepancy between dial up and dial down, which, as you saw, was quite a noticeable one. In dial up position, the amplitude was greater. And so we end this segment right where we started, which was showing the comparison of the time counter, and we'll see where we're at after a few days. We're back again after a week, and as you can see here, we're currently a week ahead, and this is where we are at. So we're just comparing, and as you can see, we're about 2 seconds, minus 2 seconds. Now that, I think, is pretty impressive. That's minus 2 seconds after a week of running on the wrist, and you really can't argue with that, can you? Yes, you could argue that because it was running like +8 when I got it, oh well, you know, it could be better. Yeah, it could, but let's face it, I've heard plenty of stories of people buying 5, 6, 7, 800 quid Seikos that are running +20 seconds a day and being told by Seiko, oh well, it's within the parameters, you know? That's that wrapped up, and hope you enjoyed this thorough detailed review and this little look inside, and we'll see you in the next one. Oh damn, I slipped. Oh well, I suppose I'd better put it through the cleaning machine now. Here we are with the watch reassembled, re-oiled, everything else. I have a few notes on the movement conditioning and what have you, which I will get to afterwards. But of course, the next thing to do is take a look at the time grapher results now. I'm going to run this as per the previous time grapher results. Same settings, 50 degrees lift angle, 2 seconds, set that to start, and away we go. From down tail up. And down or 9 high. just restarted about 2 weeks ago. And so there we are. That's the conclusion of this in-depth review, test, rebuild, whatever you want to call it. It started off initially I just intended this to be an unboxing and review of this watch. But with it having this particular movement, I got a little bit curious knowing that this was a clone of the 28242, and I have messed about with a couple of clones and they are varying in quality, but this one is by far the nicest one I have seen and worked on. It's only upon disassembly and inspecting some of the parts up close that you can see that they're not quite as nicely finished and made as the Etta, but very, very close in terms of manufacture and what have you. Now you'll notice on those time grapher results that the timings have been tightened up considerably, and the main culprit for the deviation between dial up and dial down readings in the previous time grapher tests was excessive end shake in the pallets, and this I noticed upon rebuild, and so I made some adjustments to the jewel in the pallet fork bridge, and with the relevant adjustments made, you can see it made an enormous difference. I have to say the oiling of the whole movement from the factory really wasn't bad. It wasn't the best I've seen, but it wasn't bad, and I suspect the entire thing is a fully automated process. I suspect it'll be a production line, it's going along, and everything will be oiled on an automated production line, or that's my suspicion at least. The lubrication on the balance wheel and the pallets was messy. That I did notice straight away. It was very messy, and there was an obvious creep of lubrication up the pallet stones rather than just on the face of the pallet stones, which in and of itself can be a problem in terms of running and accuracy. And the other thing I noticed was an inadequate amount of braking grease in the mainspring barrel wall. At first I thought there was none on there at all, it was so minimal, and it was only upon close inspection that you could see that there was braking grease there. It was just very, very minimal, and had that been left for a period of 6 months to a year, that could have scored the barrel walls quite badly. But in the grand scheme of things, again, looking at the price of the movement, looking at the price of the overall watch, looking at the cost of replacement parts and even a replacement movement, it's not really a problem, and it did run quite well, as you saw prior to the rebuild. Giving it a clean rebuild and fresh oil has helped immensely. As you'll see there was a huge jump in amplitude, and an enormous jump, and we were looking at figures that I would expect to see from brand new clean Etta. So all in all, I'm very pleased with the results from that. I'm glad that I did do the rebuild. I now know that this will be fine for the next 5 or 6 years, and I know that it's using good Mobius oils, because who knows which oils are used in the factory. I mean, quite simply, there's no way to know that unless it is declared anywhere on the manufacturer's website or in any technical details, but I certainly don't know myself. So I feel better for having done that, because I know that it's done, and I know that it's good now for a good few years. And overall, even without all that, I was very, very happy with the entire thing. There is one thing I've got a complaint about, a severe complaint about, and that is the case back. It is an utter pig to get a grip on to tighten or loosen by hand when it's actually being loosened on the case back tool. It's really, really hard to grip, and in this particular case I couldn't actually be bothered to dig out my serrated dies, my Rolex style dies, because they're buried at the back of a drawer because I don't use them very often. But one of those would have actually been very handy in this case, because it's kind of, while you've got the serrations there, you've then got a very flat surface with nothing really to grip on. And I know that seems like a fairly trivial thing, because you're not going to be taking the back off your watch regularly, of course, but it was frustrating trying to just get the first few threads in, and the threads on the case back did feel a little bit gritty as well. Would I recommend this watch? Yes, I absolutely 100% would. I would recommend this watch to anybody, even at the full website price. There are often discounts, discount codes and special offers being flung about. As I say, this, I think the website price was 160 something, and with a discount code I got it for 145. So, but even without the discount code, well worth it. Really, really good quality, and I'm really, really pleased with it. And there's nothing more to say. I think I've been as thorough as I could possibly be regarding this. I may throw together a little video of showing the majority of the disassembly and reassembly, because I did film the majority of that, just in case. I'm not going to include it in this video because it's going to make it epically long. And there we have it. So that's the two-part thorough in-depth review, disassembly, clean inspection, reassembly, lubrication, regulation and tweaking of the Addiesdive 36mm 1950s 60s Rolex Explorer homage. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.